Hello and welcome to Overdrive. We've got a unique conversation going on today. This today is, today the automotive industry find itself in a very unique situation. We have seen several quarters, almost 5 to 6 quarters of recession for the first time. The automotive industry has never, ever, in their wildest imagination, thought they'd all be on the same plane. For instance, zero sales in a single month. What a unique place to find ourselves in. But every single auto manufacturer in the country has had to rethink strategies and re envision the business to address the situation. Today, to discuss this way forward and how business in the automotive sector are shaping themselves, Overdrive is engaging in a conversation with a few industry leaders. I've got along with me Shashank Srivastava, who's the executive editor, sales and marketing for Maruti Suzuki India Limited, Tarun Garg, the director, sales and marketing for Hyundai Motor India, and Naveen Soni, Senior Vice President, Sales and Customer Service for Toyota Kirloskar Motor. Now, dear viewers, I'd like to say that these are industry representatives, and I'd urge you to listen to them not as individual players alone, but also as a voice of the passenger car business at large. Each of them brings a wealth of experience from the automotive sector, but like everyone else, they have found themselves in this unique situation and are addressing it accordingly. So, what are the strategies and gears being set in motion? How will the passenger car sector shape up in the future? These are some of the larger topics that we're going to be discussing today. We also invited dear readers to and viewers to post some questions. You can post those in the chat box of whichever platform you are viewing this on. But please do bear in mind that this platform today explores the industry at large. So do refrain from posting queries about specific products. We are not here to tell you about what the next product from these manufacturers are or to take in consumer complaints. So let's be very clear with that right at the beginning. Uh, and joining me on this conversation today is Rohit Paradkar as well. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you for being
Good evening.
with us today. I'll head straight to you, Shashank. Uh, what is the current state of affairs in the automotive industry? Where do we stand today? And given the circumstances, are you satisfied with the way business is redeveloping?
Yeah, good evening, Bertrand, and thank you for having me on this show. Uh, First of all, let me tell you that we were coming out, as you just mentioned, out of a very bad H1 last year, and we had an okay Q3 actually for Maruti Suzuki and also for the industry. There was actually a little positive for Maruti Suzuki. Industry was also roughly flat. So suddenly, when we had this lockdown sometime in the end of the March, we were taken a little bit by surprise because of the complete lockdown. As you just mentioned, April was absolutely zero for all players in the industry. But we have been pleasantly surprised with the bounce back which has been shown by the industry. And I think for the industry, roughly 85, 87%, if you look at the demand side of the pre-COVID levels have already been reached. And why I say and I stress on demand side is because we still have the whole supply chain, which is also disrupted because of the lockdown in the auto industry, and also because of this transition from BS4 to BS6. And that is the reason why I think the talk should be around the consumer demand from parameters such as inquiries or bookings or retails rather than on the wholesale. And I think there we have seen 85, 87%. I'm pleasantly actually surprised by the bounce back. And going forward, I'm very hopeful that with all the manufacturers actually ramping up the production, we would see good demand continuing forward. However, I must sort of caution and bring some more factors in it that the long-term demand, the steady state long-term demand, would depend on the fundamentals of the economy and also on the sentiments going forward. So we could have, for example, a vaccine upside or a virus downside. It depends on how because car buying is a discretionary purchase and sentiments also are very important. At the moment, though, I can say that we have seen a good bounce back, and our production teams across the industry are actually ramping up production to meet this demand.
Right. I'll move over to Tarun. Tarun, what's the restart strategy being applied at your end? Where is the business coming in from presently? Are urban centers contributing, or as we hear, the rural sectors bringing in some buoyancy?
Yeah, thank you, Bert. Yes, like Shashank said, I think all of us, frankly speaking, from a zero in April, and we saw June almost retail was for the industry almost 75% of last year level, and inching closer to the 90% this month. Of course, the whole of India is contributing. Let me first start by saying that. At the same time, very clearly, the tier twos are definitely doing much better. The Chandigarhs, the Punjab, the Rajasthan, the Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh are definitely doing better than the metros. One reason could be that the corona effect is probably much more in the metros. The second could also be the rural economy. With the MSPs going up and monsoons being very decent and the crop being good, I think that is also aiding. So that is one part of it. The second surprising part of it is that there was all this talk about maybe only entry level doing well, but what we are seeing is that customers are really coming ahead and buying what they actually want to buy, and so we can clearly see a very good demand for the SUVs, and which is I think a very very pleasant surprise. Of course, we know that we had new launches, but so that aspect is also extremely important. That Indian economy and especially the auto industry is quite resilient, and still customers would buy something which they want to buy, not necessarily getting bogged down by the slight economic challenging situation which exists. So that is one trend which is coming very very pleasantly coming to Hyundai. So to answer your question, yes, tier 2, tier 3 much more, and SUVs showing a very very strong resilience, in addition to of course the entry level.
That's a very interesting point that you put forward, where you're not just the small car demand. I will come back to this point later on in the conversation, but yeah, it's a very interesting point to take note of, that demand or other consumer choices can come from almost anywhere for any product. I'll just move over to Naveen. Naveen, this also pertains to you because the Toyota's strongest brand recall comes from products like the Innova first, then the Fortuner. Are you also seeing a change in consumer behavior and preferences?
Okay, I think, but before I get into the question that you're asking me, I may want to present a slightly different opinion from my co-panelist. I think the industry is developing very rapidly, but it is also kind of, no 2 days are the same for us. Basically, we have to be very careful that that as far as the market is concerned, I can tell you for sure that before this event started, there was a briefing document sent to me by the agency, and if I had to follow that particular briefing document, I would be saying things were maybe out of context, because every day is changing, every day is evolving. No 2 days are the same. So for us, the most important thing is that we keep on three keywords: speed, agility, and responsiveness. Always people have said Toyota is not equal to speed, but speed, agility, and responsiveness are the key mantras for survival in this time. We also have to understand, particularly when you were asking about, where is this demand coming from and things like that. I think in marketing we were taught about concepts like product life cycle, the introduction phase, the maturity phase, and the decline phase. But I never knew that I'll have to study this introduction, maturity, and decline of the virus. If you kind of can track that issue, I think you'll be ahead of the curve always, because as you can see, when the markets opened up, that is a May June timing. Yes, there was customers coming back, but what actually had happened, if I do a statistics last month to this month, just to compare last month to this month, last month same time, 3% of the cities and the cities were under lockdown, and how much did they contribute? 0.4% of the sales for Toyota. But this month, same timing as last month, How many cities are locked down? 17 to 18% of cities are locked down. And how much do they contribute to the business of Toyota? Is about 18%. So from a 0.4% to a 18% black hole that has been created in the market, how do you fill this up is a very important issue. And so therefore, it is very important to understand that yes, demand will be there, customers will be there, but the sentiment, of this stop, start also does break the momentum. I mean, I wasn't surprised the other day when I was reading the paper on page 4 of a newspaper. There was an article talking about the good demand coming back, and on page 7 there was an article about the start-stop scenario disrupting the market. So both are true. Both are true. So there is demand coming back definitely, but at the same time, this stop-start does disrupt the whole momentum. And how do we kind of stay ahead of the curve is the skill and acumen that we are acquiring right now.
Interesting. Shashank, I'll bounce over to you. And this is coming back again from what Tarun also said. For instance, that the SUV space is doing quite well for them. For instance, but you are market leaders in the small car space. What is your perception of how product lines will pan out, both short term and the long term?
Yeah, but I think we did have this conversation a few months back. I think just when the outlet started opening up and the unlock was happening, and all consumer researchers pointed out that people will be spending less, and a large percentage of them. So you could expect a telescoping of demand downwards, which doesn't necessarily mean that any segment will sort of disappear. It is not a disappearance of demand. So certainly there would be people even at the higher end who would otherwise may have got into a even larger vehicle, for example. So it is not as if some segment will disappear. However, let me tell you from the demand side parameters, from the booking, the retails, as well as from the inquiry levels, there is a clear trend that the small cars are doing better. In fact, last year, for example, our total inquiries and bookings were about 55-56% in small cars, hatches. We are now getting about 65%. And talking about the SUV factor, yes, in the long term, I generally would agree with what Tarun San is saying, which is that this could be a short term, this movement downwards, the telescoping of demand could be a short term phenomena. And it's logical also, it's intuitive also, it is borne by research of consumer research also, and it is also borne by the actual data we have so far. Of course, there are other factors which come into play, as Tarun was mentioning very rightly. It could be a newness of some products. It could be a launch of new. It could be a demand from a higher side coming downwards. It is possible in any segment. But I think you are right. If you look at the SUV segment, in the long term, I think generally the body type preference is shifting towards the SUV, as you could see from the last few years. In fact, in 2014-15, the SUV type of vehicles, the body type was about, I think, about 8 to 9%, which is now about 28%. And I think that is the long-term trend which we are finding. It's not just in India, but across the world, in Europe, in Latin America, in China, and all those places. But yes, in the short term, I can tell you that intuitive thought, logical, as also the empirical, and also what is borne out by consumer research does indicate to a telescoping of demand downwards. And I must add here that it is clear that most people would from all research also indicates, all consumer research indicates that there is expectancy that the income levels of consumers would be coming down across the all industries, not just auto industry, and that is actually also quite clear post COVID. So I think we have to wait and watch for a longer time, look at the retail data, and also see where the long-term demand moves. But yes, this is what I feel about this subject of the demand patterns going forward.
In fact, Shashank-san, this is exactly what I wanted to ask you, and not just you, but all the panelists here. That all the products that we've seen from the three car makers are present here. You have everything from small cars all the way up to SUVs that are crossing the 40 lakh rupee mark between the three of you. And we've always seen that each and every product that is launched in this space, you're talking about it being targeted towards the younger audience, people who are not scared anymore to spend on automobiles, which has predominantly been a luxury buy, no matter what the price point. So where do you see this changing now? Do you think people will be still as eager to go out and buy a product and actually make that decision? Or like you said, with income levels going down across segments, across industries, will we see the consumer behavior go onto a back foot and maybe not looking at buying an automobile at all? Because at the end of the day, this is still a luxury purchase.
Yeah, if the question is directed to me, then let me tell you, I think it's also there has been a detailed study about consumer buying behavior, yeah, post COVID, and it does indicate that the replacement buying is actually would come down. People will tend to stick to their products a little longer. Replacement buying will come down, even though the demand for pre-owned cars may go up, and also the functional buying, which is largely reflected in the first time buyers, would go up, and it is being seen from the data which we have for the last 3 months. And the other point which you made, which is also very relevant, is that the psychographics of the Indian consumer is changing. And you are right, they were more experimentative, and I think with our economy developing as we go along, they would become experimentative, and therefore the current demand patterns that you see may not exist down the line. However, in the short term, and right now if we are talking only of the short term, it is logical that the consumer behavior would be less experimentative. People not only will gravitate towards the more established brand, but also the body types would also be more conservative. So I think that is where we are, and we have to see and watch for a longer period of time to come to any definitive conclusion.
Okay, in fact, I'll toss this same question to Naveen San as well. Again, building on what you said, if it's the body type that is obviously going to be very important and people are going to be conservative, how would a Toyota react to this, considering majority of your sales still come from cars like the Innova and the Fortuner, and that ideally is where your brand recall is. Of course, you have a small car in the Glanza right now. So what are your thoughts on the small car segment, of course, and also your big car business like the SUVs and the MPVs?
Yeah. So I think, see, when you get into a showroom to buy a car, you exactly have an idea of how much you want to spend. Okay. You want the best deal out of that money that you're spending, and you vaguely, not to say vaguely, very clearly you know what kind of a vehicle are you looking at. You know, whether you're looking at a three box, two box, or a SUV or a MUV or whatever. So I think when you look at the mobility needs per se, mobility needs means, you know, at this point of time, the consumer wants to travel from point A to point B in a safe manner. Look at the kind of restrictions that are put in a city like Bombay. You know, when you have to move, if the rail line is not working, if the buses are not taking, you know, normal passengers, then obviously he has to move. Of course, there are other issues also. So mobility needs are increasing, personal mobility, if you want to call them more specifically, but their propensity to spend is not increasing because there's a looming threat of a job, reduction of salary, etc., etc. So in such case, safety becomes the most important parameter. So yes, we have also seen, you know, just to narrate our story, we have also seen robust demand come back into the entry level segments. Yes, and also within the segments, the customer seems to be saying, okay, if there are four types of Innovas, which is the lowest price Innova? Because that will also suffice my need. This shift is not as severe as in the low end of the market because of the impact that is visible to him is maybe not as severe as compared to entry level hatchback segment. So there are only two questions asked: what is the price, and what is the lowest end of this vehicle that you have? What is the price of that car? That's it. There are no such discussions. And what is of course the best deal that you can offer to me on that particular vehicle? Obviously that will be a last question. So the customer knows exactly what he wants, and this COVID scare is just accentuating the need for personal mobility, which is leading to this kind of a situation where the customer walks in, he asks only the questions that are relevant to him, he knows his pocket size, and then based on that pocket size he asks what is available. Yeah.
Tarun, I'd like to jump in over here and ask Tarun the same thing and pose this, following up on what Naveen just mentioned. Are you seeing a similar trend? Are consumers coming in, with a very clear mindset? Or, what is it that you're looking for otherwise? What's your opinion on this?
Actually, in our case, things are very different and totally different perspective. In fact, I would give an example of Creta, and we were just analyzing the bookings, and what we saw was that 60% of the customers who have booked, they have booked with a vehicle with a panoramic sunroof. 60% want connectivity, Blue Link. 30% have bought automatic. Now close to 60% have bought diesel. So in our case, whether it is the novelty of the product or whether, with all humility, we have been able to communicate the advantages of the features, but somehow that kind of trend is not visible. Of course, I have to flag it. We are only 3 months into the launch of the new Creta, but we are, frankly speaking, receiving a very good, demand for the high end as well. In fact, I was analyzing across the variants, and there is across the models, and there is not so much of a downward trend as such visible, nothing perceptible. So that is first part of it. The second part of it, which is very interesting, is if I analyze Hyundai's numbers last year, SUVs used to contribute 35% to our total sales, and now post COVID, they are contributing 50% to our Hyundai sales. And so, frankly speaking, as far as we are concerned, the traction for and this is not only about Creta, even the Venue or the i20 or even the new Verna. I think the traction is very strong, which clearly demonstrates as long as a company is ready to bring in some exciting products in the market with new technologies, exciting features, I think customers are still willing to go ahead and buy. Is what I can add to from my perspective and from the data which we are witnessing at Hyundai.
Which is very interesting because this is actually one of the questions I was going to ask you a little later on, and each of you all has got certain strengths, certain characteristics. Whether it's and do correct me and feel free to add in if I'm uh, Maruti plays out to a price conscious buyer. You have something for everyone at various price points. Hyundai, you've got premium value to rich feature lists and strong design to price conscious buyers. Toyota, on the other hand, you stand like a wall of reliability and longevity. And most of, at least what Tarun and Naveen say, people have clearly come in with these particular, mindsets into walking into your showrooms at this present moment. And I'd like to, Shashank as well, do you have an opinion on this as well? Are you seeing a similar pattern emerging over here as well?
But the question is to me.
Yeah, Shashank. Shashank,
I didn't get the first part of your question because
I'm saying, so I was saying, each of you all, Maruti, Hyundai, Toyota, each of you all have got very strong characteristic key points that attract consumers to each of your businesses. Yeah, Maruti has always been very, very strong about these value conscious and price conscious buyers, where you've also been able to, offer something or the other to everyone who wants something in at various price points. Hyundai has brought in premium value with feature lists that are very, very rich. They've also gotten great design through their products. Toyota, again, it's a wall. Reliability, longevity, backed by indelible quality. So, are you also seeing a similar mindset where consumers are coming, walking in, saying, this is what we're looking at from Maruti, or has that changed in the present environment?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think I completely agree with Naveen because this is not a pre-COVID or post-COVID phenomena. We have been seeing this for a very long time. A lot of consumers, in fact, I think the statistics says about 47% of the consumers know exactly what they want to buy when they come into the showroom. This is also one of the reasons why showroom visits have come down. People tend to research on the internet and through digital means and find out what exactly they want. They do the comparisons, etc., on their own. So I think that phenomena is very clear. People are very clear what they want to buy. Having said that, I think what Maruti Suzuki does, and I think all companies also look at the market they want to operate in. And India, for example, 50% or 47% is a hatch market. So there, obviously, the quality, the reliability, the value becomes primary. And I think in the as you go upward in terms of the prices, the consumer starts looking for even more richer features, etc., which is what I think Tarun was pointing out, and that's what you are also saying. But Maruti Suzuki, for example, earlier we were purely a hatch player, but we were market leaders by far, almost 70%, 75% of the market of hatch. Even today, even in sedans, which was then considered to be the next higher level, we are the market leaders even in the category of the sedans, where Varna and Corolla and City operate. So it is the SUVs, and which you can break down into an entry level or a mid SUV. So yes, the entry level SUV, of course, our product Brezza, which does very well thanks to its great reliability and also very great design. It's the upper end which we will, of course, shortly be addressing as well. So I think the consumer is evolving, and as the consumer is evolving, I think manufacturers have to go with what the market requires. And I think that's what most manufacturers do. Of course, every manufacturer has its own strengths, and I think that's where the industry will head to. There is no way any company can do well without looking at what the consumer really wants.
Right. In fact, I'm going to sort of ask you a question, Shashank San.
Yes.
There has been almost a three-digit growth that you've shown recently. Hyundai has also shown a massive growth again, and we are seeing these kind of reports coming up from the entire industry. So, is it like Mr. Tarun said? Is it because it's a new product, or is it because certain orders that were piled up and people were waiting to buy their new car, and all of that has been delivered now in the retail space, or is it a fact now that the industry is actually recovering faster than what we expected? In fact, this is a question for both of you at Maruti and Hyundai. So, what is the scenario exactly? Is it, like I said, a new product or the hype of the new product, or just orders piling up and then being delivered, or is it the industry showing faster signs of recovery than what we expected?
So, Tarun, would you like to go first?
So you want me to answer?
Tarun, you would like to answer? He's posing a question to both of us.
Some interesting data. The inquiry to retail in the post-COVID time has actually come down to 9 days from the earlier 20 days. So very clearly, it is not about the pent-up demand or the orders in the pre-COVID times. Mind you, the lockdown happened actually, at a very inappropriate time in terms of it was the Gudi Parva and the Navratras coming in. So frankly, we were all expecting that those bookings are the ones which will materialize. However, the interesting trend which has been witnessed is that people who are coming after the unlock, they are much more assured about their purchase, and their conversions are becoming much faster. So that, I think, is a very, very important aspect. The second aspect, like I said, I don't think it is only about the new products. I think it is about the Indian customer really looking at strong brands, and we are very clearly witnessing. And as Shashank also said, that Venue doing very well, the i20, the pull is very good, the Nios, the pull is very good, and of course new products definitely, whether it is the Verna or the Aura or the Creta, of course doing well. But I'm sure, and I've seen it in the past in my experience, that whenever the time is of a slight economic stress, customers would want to go for very strong brands, because they will rather not take a risk or adventure, like they said. At the same time, I will add that aspiration wise, I don't think there is any dearth of aspiration in the Indian customer, and very clearly I can say with a lot of confidence that customers are wanting seriously to buy a product which they want to buy, because car is not for 1 month or 2 months. I think car is still for a good number of years. So I don't think it is really too much influenced by the current income level as such, is what I can tell that is being witnessed at least at Hyundai.
I'm going to jump in again over here also. Naveen, I'd like to pose this question to you as well. You've seen
Sure.
the Glanza, for instance, 25,000 units in a year. It's done phenomenally well. That's a very strong selling product for you. Do you also share similar sentiments about the way the market is shaping up?
See, as I said earlier, also, India happens to be, India is not one market. India is one large market, and it's got multi layers of, stratified same kind of customers at different price points, existing. So it is, the triangle might be, a little bigger at the base, and that is why, the GDP per capita would indicate where the customers would like to, park their money as far as vehicles is concerned. So obviously, the market is larger at the bottom end, and therefore, I think when in this kind of a scenario, I have a simple thought. In this kind of a scenario, if you and I are concerned, what are the two main concerns that you have? Is basically safety and how to travel from point A to point B in a very safe environment. That's the most important thing for anybody. So if that is the case, there would be certain downshift of the market also, which will be accelerated during this period. We'll analyze this next year, same time. We'll see that the market has shifted down. Why has that happened? Because the size of the market is shrinking, and also the dimensions which were there, in terms of the economic impact of this COVID, will make people start to think what they were thinking maybe 3 years or 4 years back. I was talking to somebody and I was saying that that it will be very similar to what the market was maybe 3 years or 4 years before, and the same characteristics would emerge when we analyze this market next year, because at the end of the day, economically he's stressed. Economically he's stressed. He doesn't know whether his job is secure. He doesn't know what kind of a salary he's getting next month, etc., etc. So, but at the same time, safety is becoming important. That is what is getting him. So to answer your question about, yes, we are seeing that settling down of the market at the low end, and within the same segments also, as I was saying, it may be different for a Innova segment, which might be just 3% consolidation at the bottom. But if you look at the lowest product that we sell in terms of price point, Glanza, yes, there's a 7% down selling of the product, because the customer's second question is, what is the lowest price vehicle that you have in Glanza? So it's a very clear question that he's asking, because he doesn't want to confuse the issue of that I have this mobility need which is arising out of safety, and it is contradicted by my economic situation. So obviously, these two, when you put it together, obviously what emerges is that his choices are limited, and therefore this kind of an environment emerges. That's my take.
Yes. Adding to what Rohit was initially asking about this quarter, about 3x sale and 2x sales and so on. Actually, it's only about when you compare it with the previous month. So June would be, for example, for us in retail, maybe 3 times what we retailed in May and so on. But if you compare with last year, you still have a negative. And here I must
Right.
caution that the headline making news is about wholesale figures. That's what the industry actually reports. Industry, like for example, it was about I think minus 50% or minus 52% in the month of June in wholesale. But in retail, it was only minus 22 or 23. And I think that is where we need to look at a clear distinction between the wholesale numbers and the retail numbers, which is normally you will have wholesale and retail very close together in a normal situation. But these are unprecedented times, and we find that both on the supply chain side, which is under stress, and therefore the ramping of production happening. One, second, a lot of manufacturers did not have BS6 vehicles, which they introduced later after March. Third,
Yeah.
a lot of people had stock levels which were different. Some of the manufacturers did not have large stock because they were very careful. They were dispatching BS4 vehicles in March. Whereas some manufacturers who had BS6 vehicles, they continued the dispatch. And as Tarun said, it came at a very inappropriate time because the last week of March was supposed to be extremely good for retail. So some manufacturers were carrying higher stocks. So you have this supply chain, the stock levels, the wholesale thing, which is making, we have to look at the retail side and the consumer demand side, and that's why I keep stressing and going back to parameters which reflect consumer demand rather than just a wholesale demand. And that I think going forward, as you see the production ramping up, you will start seeing how the demand patterns pan out. And as I said, in the long term, actually it will depend on the fundamentals of the economy, and the sentiments as related to which way the COVID thing moves. This is what I feel is the current situation.
Okay, I'm going to ask one quick question about the shared mobility and the safety aspect that we're talking about. I mean, of course, that's going to be playing on everybody's mind, and shared mobility could take a backseat now. So, how do you look at it? Is it an opportunity, or let's just analyze the pros and cons of this, because somewhere we had also started seeing a trend, at least in the metros, where given problems with parking spaces, congestion, and all of that, consumers were starting to sort of tilt towards shared mobility and not look at personal ownership of a vehicle. Subscription models were starting to come up, and all the Olas and Ubers of the world were starting to gain a lot of prominence. Now that will certainly take a backseat. So, do you see this as an opportunity for more new car sales, or this was never a threat to begin with? Because especially Hyundai and Maruti, you are very strong players in this particular segment. And for Toyota, again, shared mobility is a completely different and a very important segment for the entire Innova lineup. So, what are your viewpoints for all three of you? Maybe Naveen San, you could start off, and then we move to Maruti and Hyundai as well.
Uh, So, yes, shared mobility is going to take a bit of a hit because of this current condition. Yes, it's a fact that you and I have to live with. I always believe that calling this as an opportunity, it sounds very opportunistic as a marketeer. Basically, yes, this will throw up opportunities in terms of personal mobility growth, but it comes at the cost of the customer being forced to get into a car, of his own choice, rather than using a vehicle from going from point A to point B comfortably. So he did not exercise this option when shared mobility was there in pre-COVID era. So from that point of view, yes, it makes a big difference. Yes, in terms of sales, yes, it may result into sales, but that's not what you and I, as responsible manufacturers, would like to see. Growth at the cost of somebody's inconvenience. I would like to see a customer drive my product with a lot of pride, passion, and everything that is necessary. That is how he should be looking at it. Yeah.
Right. And what is your point of view, Tarun San?
So yes, I think some new opportunities are coming in definitely. As far as Hyundai is concerned, we launched this subscription about 1 year back, and it's a very easy way where a customer can actually rent a car, and it takes care of smart mobility, and of course it's personal mobility, and that safety aspect which Naveen was talking about is also taken care of. And very clearly, what we have been witnessing is a huge jump in the inquiries for the subscription model, at Hyundai. And interestingly, that is also happening at the entry level, the Santros and the Nios as well. So I think some new opportunities are definitely emerging. At the same time, you're right. Frankly, I think shared mobility has given a lot of convenience to so many customers, and I don't think that this phenomena of shared mobility being out of the consideration of the customers is going to last long. Probably we will see in a probably year or two. Of course, depends on the corona situation, corona vaccine, blah blah blah. At the same time, I think it will also come back. Another trend which is also emerging is the pre-owned car, because a huge inquiry again for pre-owned cars. And like Shashank mentioned, while customers are not ready to exchange their cars because they want to hold on to their car, maybe give it to their wife or to their son or to their brother, they want an additional car. At the same time, the demand is increasing, which is actually pushing up the probably the price of the pre-owned cars as well. So I think this is another interesting trend which is emerging in the market.
Right. So, do you collectively believe that subscription models and the pre-owned business, and maybe even the in-house financing and leasing schemes, will now take a lot of precedence in the post-COVID era?
Yeah,
I
I
feel
think
that
so.
I think there are
Oh, sorry.
definitely because India being so big and Indian car penetration being so low, I think the opportunities are there. Now it is up to the OEMs to really being innovative and having some very flexible finance offers, very flexible EMI assurance schemes, very flexible subscription offers. We have to see, because customer is there now, what are his needs and how you can program your offering based on his needs. I think is going to be the key going forward, and this is what I believe all the OEMs are trying to do, and I think that will really help us to pull up
Tarun,
the
I think
demand.
you're losing.
Yeah,
Yeah. May I add, Rohit?
sure.
Yes, Shashank sir.
Yeah, on the subscription thing, I think surely shared mobility will take a back seat for a long time till people are confident enough. And as Tarun mentioned, maybe in the long run, maybe it comes back. And I think subscription is already seeing some traction. Maruti Suzuki is doing a subscription, as recently launched subscription. We are getting very good traction. And on the point, we are starting with the white plate subscription, and of course the black plate subscription when it comes along with the self drive. Probably the market can be really big, and that is what I think. Irrespective of whether the shared mobility thing comes back or not, or how long before it comes back, you will still find a lot of traction in subscription. That's what we are finding. Second, on your question of lease and fleet, yes, Indian market is just about 2-3% in that fleet, whereas in more developed markets, close to 30-32%. And I think going forward, that would also become a very large portion of the Indian market as well. And I'm talking of a slightly long-term perspective here. So I think yes, the fundamentals of consumer choices with regard to mobility are in for a very interesting time in India, and I believe there are two sets will emerge. One is the more conservative or more sort of conventional demand patterns in some areas, and some more slightly more experimentative and a different and a more advanced, if I can call it that, patterns in some other areas. And we do see some of this effect clearly in the demand patterns we see today, including the pre-owned cars, which Tarun mentioned. So pre-owned car, yes, we have seen a lot of demand, but the pressure there is on the supply rather than on the sale side. It is the buying side which is seeing the pressure in the pre-owned market rather than on the sale side. That's also a
Right.
very interesting phenomena which we expect this year to be there for a long time.
Okay.
Right. I'm gonna shift focus here again and come on to something that a new trend that's kind of everyone's playing out on, and again, given the circumstances, the digital world that we are on. We are all playing in the digital spaces, and it's a big talking point at the moment. Uh, as journalists, we ourselves, we are attending digital press conferences. As manufacturers, you're creating these new platforms where we can engage with you as well, and then see your product presentations. And some of them have been pretty interesting. In fact, all of them have been very interesting. It's a very, it's a larger world, I think. Where you can play in a much bigger way. But while we all agree in theory, I would assume that this is a great platform. Uh, and we agree that it's additional tools for the dealership, for businesses to operate in. Is it working as expected, or is it a tool that is still is this used by prospective buyers for research? Are you able to actually generate more sales out of this? Is this the way forward? Let me go with Tarun Khan first, and then I'll come on to the rest of you guys.
I think this is very interesting, Bert. And frankly, back, we had a kind of a virtual launch, the next dimension. And frankly speaking, in less than 4 weeks of preparation and in 35 minutes flat, we were able to showcase three products in a very, very good, virtual space to the customers. And we could reach as many as close to 20 million customers already have witnessed it. The teaser itself. And so my point is that I think this COVID is also throwing in some opportunities, and we can very clearly see that maybe going further, this could also be a tool for us to use even in normal times. Secondly, on the purchase journey, I think platforms like Click to Buy, where a customer can actually not only explore about the car, not only book the car or do a financing, but actually he can do a end-to-end kind of a purchase, is really going to become a very good reality. Of course, I'll add a rider here, that when we offer the customer that okay sir, we will deliver the car to you, He says, no, 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 no. Car buying, everything else digital is okay, but it is a very emotional decision, and I want to, this occasion, I want to really come to the showroom with my family to take a delivery. So my point is, I think this is like a phygital space kind of a thing, and a huge advantage for our dealers, because not only have their digital inquiries increased to close to 25 and 30, 25 to 30%, which is a huge digital asset to them. At the same time, their relevance remains very, very high, because the customer still wants to really come, touch and feel, and take the delivery of the car at the dealership. So I think it's a best of both worlds, which are very clearly emerging in the post-COVID era.
Naveen San, I'll pose that question to you. What are your opinions on the subject?
I think, in addition to, yes, digital, initially we also saw the spurt coming forward. I think the most important thing that you have to understand is the return on investment. If I do an advertisement today, people are not reading newspapers, so it's not reaching them. They are online all the time, so obviously their priorities are different. So obviously this medium becomes the center stage at this point of time. And from a ROI perspective, the kind of, the ad revenues that you have to pay towards digital is comparatively, if you think smartly, then you can reach out to the end customer in a very focused manner rather than spray and pray. You can reach out to a very focused manner, the kind of customers that you want to reach out. So this is a new learning for all of us. I think it was in the evolution phase, and it's just got accelerated because of the COVID situation. So I think it is here to stay, and we have to learn these things: artificial intelligence. How does the customer buy online? What is his buying pattern? What are the cookies that he leaves here and there? All these things have to be mapped in a very effective way, and then I think we have a very robust plan that can be put in place. So I think these marketing tools will also evolve very rapidly.
Shashank, you also, your opinion as well on this, because Maruti also has had a very strong presence in the digital space. We've seen it over the last, over a year for that matter. But what are your views on this as well?
Yeah, so clearly digital is the way forward, and I would also like to concur with Tarun when he says it's actually digital, which which we are seeing the path ahead. You know, now almost all points are sort of digitalized in the consumer interaction, except for the ones of delivery, the test drive, and the financing part. And now even the financing part will shortly, and I think all the OEMs in the industry are working for making that also digital. Having said that, and I think this is not about a post-COVID or pre-COVID. We have been observing it for the last few years. In fact, 3% of our inquiries used to come from digital, about 35%. It's pretty large. It's much larger than the walk-ins and the other forms of inquiry which we used to have earlier. But walk-ins also strangely have made a strong comeback, especially this month. Still about 17-18% of the total inquiries coming from physical scene. And also, I must say the conversion ratios are getting a little better for the web inquiries. And that is also comes from a very interesting data I was reading somewhere from a Google Analytics, which is 92% of the auto buyers in India, they do research on the digital way before they come into into this thing, and 47%, as I just mentioned earlier, part of the program, already make up their mind. And therefore, I think this is going to accelerate going forward, especially when you have new technical tools like AR, VR, which will probably make it even more interesting. And finally, I think if you look at the experience of other countries where digital has been going for a very long time, you still have almost 90% of the people come to the showroom at some point or the time of their experience of car buying. And that is why I think that apart from the digital infrastructure, the physical infrastructure of the showrooms will also play a very important part in any strategy which any OEM will have in our country.
Shashank San, sorry, just to interrupt over here, I think we've lost video feed for you. If you can just leave and come back again, we'll add you on again.
Yeah. Do I?
Yeah, just leave the studio and you can rejoin. Hopefully that should
Okay.
sort
Fine.
out the issue.
Okay, I think while Shashank-san does that, I'm going to quickly, touch upon a very important topic, that of electric vehicles and hybrids. Now, Hyundai has already started the EV game for the brand with the Kona, and Toyota, on the other hand, has always been the flag bearer for the hybrid technology in India. So, do you see the EVs and hybrids now sort of taking a backseat? The market had just about started warming up to these technologies and thinking positively about these vehicles, but now do you see a big setback coming because of the current situation?
Look, Rohit,
Yeah,
I
so I'm
think
back.
Hyundai was one of the first companies when we
Yeah.
launched the Kona electric last year, and it was a full electric, and even in the SUV space, of course. And I believe that the direction of India moving towards cleaner mobility has begun in a big way. Of course, it includes electrics, hybrid, CNG, diesel BS6, petrol BS6. So I think that movement has definitely begun. Yes, you're right. Because of this the current situation, maybe the capital investments could mean 6 months, 1 year here and there. At the same time, I feel the movement has begun, and I don't see it going back. So frankly, from a Hyundai perspective, I think globally we are very strong in the EV space. Kona EV continues a good traction with the customers. We have already announced that in 2 to 3 years' time, we will be bringing a mass EV as well for India. So we are fairly confident that going forward, along with BS6, along with CNG, and of course hybrids and EV, I think that the march towards cleaner mobility, as far as India is concerned, has is like a irreversible kind of a march.
Naveen sir, what is your take on this? And in fact, I'm going to add one more sub question to this, especially for you. Like I said, Toyota has been the flag bearer for hybrids. But what do you think? What is the reason for the industry as a whole, the Indian automotive industry as a whole, not really looking at the hybrid midpoint very actively? Everyone's talking about EVs, or they are still talking about petrol and diesel, or even CNG for that matter. But why has no one really explored the plug-in hybrid technology for the Indian market?
Yeah, I think, see, first thing first, I think electrification is fait accompli. You and I will live in a world because, see, from a resource perspective, petroleum products or fossil fuel has a limitation. It is limited. It is limited to the extent of whatever is buried under the ground. So, therefore, electrification as a source of energy for the vehicle movement is bound to happen. It's bound to take shape. But I think the only challenge that we have to see is that how does this transition take place? Because we are used to, you and I are used to stepping into a car without worrying about where I will have to when I have to charge this, or how long it will take me to charge this car, etc., etc. I just want to drive on. Mobility gives me freedom, and that is something that I'm used to today. So basically, from that point of view, electrification journey will be has started. Yes, I totally agree, and it will be taking shape in various shape and size. I think there are regulatory pressures that will accelerate this process, and there are also consumer choices that will determine how fast this will be taken or adopted. So from that point of view, I think the journey has begun. Whether it will go the route that most of the countries have taken, that it will go through the hybrids and the plug-in hybrids and then go to electrics, or whatever intentions the Indian government may have about pure electrification, etc. I think time alone will tell. Consumers are the ultimate choice, have the ultimate choice or the power to buy whatever technologies are being offered to them. It is for them to decide. Finally, it's not for the manufacturers to sell, it is for the consumers to buy.
Right. Shashank, what is your perspective on this? While you were restarting, our question was essentially about EVs and hybrids. Do you think that the EV brigade for India, it will have a setback now because of the COVID, and particularly for Maruti Suzuki, you have already gone on record saying that you are looking at bringing a mass market EV very soon. So are those plans still as per schedule, or is there any setback there as well?
Yeah, Rohit. So I would not like to comment on our product plan going forward. However, I completely agree with Naveen that consumers will decide what level of electrification in vehicles will take place, and of course, regulatory also. and I completely agree with Naveen. Because, if you look at the worldwide market of the about 80, 90 million cars which were sold last year, only about 1.5% that was electric. Even though there have been, infrastructure of charging which is present in many of the countries except for Norway and Netherlands, there is not a single country where you have a large penetration of electric vehicles. And in India particularly, because the technology of battery which is available in the world today makes the electric vehicles quite expensive, and the battery cost, of course, is a large portion of the electric vehicle cost, which is about 55-60% almost of the total cost of the vehicle is battery cost. And secondly, in India, the charging infrastructure is not yet developed. And thirdly, you have a range anxiety. So if you have a lower power battery, you have a lesser distance that it can cover with a single charge. That is the reason why electrification hasn't really taken off, not only in India but across the world. Having said that, I must also say that the process of electric vehicle development has started across in the world and also in India, and most OEMs are doing it. Now, if you see the projections which have been made by various research agencies, like Bloomberg agency, for example, have done about 7% by 2030, the market will be electric vehicles. Remember, between 2020 to 2030, even if you take a CAGR of 7.5%, which is the projections currently, India will be producing about 70 million cars, out of which, if 7% is what you go by most research people, then they say about 5 million will be electric. So 65 million, remember, will still be ICE. So what do you do about the emission levels from these 65 million cars? You also have to look at the vendor supply chain development as well. So what you need is a technology which brings down the emission for the conventional ICE engines. One way, of course, is hybrid, and that's what is the direction most countries have followed, except for some, as Naveen mentioned. So one is hybrid, whether it's strong hybrid, plug-in hybrid, mild hybrid, whatever. Second is the fuel type itself. So, for example, today, if you don't have electric vehicles in a mass market in India, at least you have the option of CNG, for example. So I think a mix of technologies is what we need to look at for the next few years till the electric vehicles become the norm of the day. And they can become the norm of the day, provided you have the appropriate technology and the infrastructure. And that is what we at Maruti Suzuki are looking at, while we have that development, as you rightly pointed out. But at the same time, we need to have, in this interim period, to do something to get more fuel efficient ICE engines, to get hybrids, to have a mix of fuel types like CNG, etc. And that would be, I think, the solution going forward for our country.
Right.
Okay.
Gentlemen, I'm going to take a few questions here because there are quite a few questions that have come our way, and I think we're also running short on time. Uh, but I'll just quickly go through them and post them to you as well. And this is the first question I'd like to take. Of course, this is at all three of you all, for that matter. How tough? This comes from Mandar Haldankar. How tough was the BS6 transition as compared to BS4 transition? Shashank, can we start off with you?
Yeah. So BS6, of course, is tougher because we skipped BS5. Remember, we straight
Yeah.
away went from BS4 to BS6. That's what the government regulation demanded, and that requires a lot of changes in the engine technology as well as the existing engine, whatever the level of BS4 was. And thankfully for Maruti Suzuki, we introduced the BS6 vehicle actually 1 year ahead of the government mandated date of 1st April 2020. Some of the models like Alto and Baleno we launched in April 2019. And that is why the transition to BS6, as far as Maruti Suzuki was concerned, was quite smooth. However, it was tough from a engineering point of view, because all the models which we have we had 17 of them last year, had to be converted to BS6. And I think it was pretty tough to manage both the downturn which we found in the industry, the stock levels, the dealer profitability, our own profitability, as also this transition which was mandated. Because remember, from a marketing perspective, I can say it was also tough, not only from engineering perspective, from a marketing perspective, because it made there was an increase in price as well because of this. Not only the emission norms but also the safety norms. And I think in a price sensitive market as India, this was also one of the reasons why we saw a downturn last year. But thankfully, we have got out of this situation in the sense that most of the manufacturers, OEMs, have already introduced the BS6 because they now they have to sell only the BS6. So let's see how it goes from here, from the current levels.
Was the situation similar for you, Tarun, as well at Hyundai?
In fact, at Hyundai, for us, it was even more challenging because we decided that we will do BS6 petrol, we will do BS6 diesel as well. But the advantage which HMI, Hyundai Motor India, had was that we had a very strong support from HMC, our global headquarters at Seoul. I think that was a big advantage, and I must admit that we were able to really introduce BS6 diesel because there was an industry talk that maybe BS6 diesel would be very difficult to do, maybe very high price increase. But what we have seen is that not only we were able to really keep the cost low, but provide a very powerful, fuel efficient, and of course emission regulation matching engine. And we are seeing the results here, and very good results at that. Like I mentioned, that we are already seeing close to now 60% demand in Creta coming for diesel, and about one third demand coming even in Verna and Venue for diesel. So I think while it was challenging, but at the same time, now I think we are bearing fruits for that hard work done by our engineering teams, both in India as well as in Korea.
Naveen, what about you, sir? Was that as well a challenging situation?
Yeah, I think the only request that we've always made to the government is to give us a roadmap, and as long as the roadmap was clear to us when BS6 is going to come, that was defined, and the only challenge in that regard was the fuel availability, because mainly for diesel car makers, the biggest challenge was fuel has to be available, because otherwise, there could be a damaging effect on the vehicle, especially the diesel vehicles. So that was the timing issue, which we had to carefully monitor, and then map according to the plan for the oil companies, which was being discussed continuously between automotive industry, government, and the oil industry. And I think when the plan became very clear that the rollout plan was evident, I think it was only a question of introducing those products. We had to be clear that that we don't end up in a situation where towards we have lot of dealer inventory towards the end, because that creates unnecessary pressure on the system. So I think we did a good job in terms of managing that, and I think at the end of it, everybody in the system had a smooth transition. Thank you.
Shashank, I'll just pose this question to you. The two questions are actually from two different individuals, and I'll just put them as one. There's one from Ninath Deshmukh who asks what the effect will be on the used car industry, and in the same vein, Rohit Nalwadi has a question asking: is there a greater demand present now with subscription and leased buying platforms for each of the manufacturers? But yeah, I'll largely pose this question to you at this point in time.
The first part of the question, I was, I mean, it was, I'm not able to clearly understand the
what effect. No, so the first part of the question was what effect will the used car industry see?
Aha. Yeah, so I'll take that first as put to me. Used car industry, by the way, is much bigger than the new car industry. So the generally we don't have very authentic data, but all research points out that it's about 1.3 to 1.6 times the new car industry in India, which means that about 4 million or 4.2 million cars were sold last year as used cars. There was a used car sales growth last year also, even though about 10%, even though the new car industry degrew by almost 18%. So, and this has been the trend over the last few years. And going forward this year also, it's expected, and we have been discussing that in the panel already many times, that the used car demand should go up as the demand for public, for personal transport goes up. And there the issue is, of course, about the buying side, where not many people might come forward for offering their cars because they may not want to upgrade at this time immediately. So we do believe that the demand for used car will go up even this year. Um, and also, I believe that going forward, the transition will be to more organized used car market. The used car market, by the way, is only 18% of the total used car market in India is organized, and that is actually increasing. So going forward, I do believe that the used car organized industry will grow, and we have already seen many of these used car organized players in the market already. The second question, Button, was would you repeat that? Something to do with
Yeah.
fleet, I think.
So the second question was, is there a greater demand present now for subscription and lease buying platforms?
Yeah. I think we discussed in the panel. Yes, it's true that with the shared mobility coming down, and also remember fleet sales in most markets, in especially developed markets, as high as 30%. In India, is just about 2-3%. Yes, we will see, and we are also seeing when you have the black plate subscription service also introduced. That is the time when by the OEMs. I think both white and black plate subscription, they will actually propel the market even more. We do find, by the way, we are doing this subscription in few cities. There has been actually a very good traction for subscription service, especially post COVID, and that is why we think most OEMs would be looking at it very closely. Tarun mentioned that they have experience, in fact, for the last 1 year or so,
Yes.
and I think it's clear that subscription also would see a uptick going forward.
Tarun, Naveen, would you like to add something over here as well?
Yeah, so I agree fully with Shashank, and yes, because subscription actually offers a very good flexibility to the customer. I'll give you an example. So, if a customer wants to own the car, and suppose he wants to only own it for own means he wants to use the car in his personal space, then and say suppose for 1 year, then the rental or a per month EMI for a subscription is half of what he would have to pay if he was taking it for a 12-month loan and owning. So that is, I think, very clearly a very good advantage to some customers who would not want to own the car. So that is one part of it. And second part of it is, like I said, India, different folks, different strokes, and it is up to us to see that for different categories of customers, what kind of innovative solutions provided. And we saw that in the finance schemes as well, because a link to all this is also about the finance schemes. And we realized that finance penetration for us, in fact, people were talking about that finances are becoming maybe more stringent, but we saw at Hyundai, because we were able to offer some very flexible schemes, our finance penetration actually increased by 2% in the post-COVID times from the earlier times. I think some very interesting and pleasantly surprising trends are emerging, and we have to continuously learn, adapt, and be flexible, and make sure how we can understand the needs, spoken as well as latent needs of the customer, and adjust our offering accordingly. I'm sure we are going to see a good traction for our offerings in the market.
Yeah.
Naveen, do you have something in that case as well?
See, I think the only additional point that I would like to make is, see, from an enabling environment point of view, yes, subscription, why is it not taking off will be the question. Why is it not taking off the way it should have before even COVID? COVID is
Absolutely.
just providing an accelerated fuel to this subscription direction. Because why is the customer not buying car? Because of, as I said earlier, that this economic status is not matured enough, so that he can get into owning a car. So from that point of view, and he knows that this is a temporary phenomena. Hopefully, sooner than later we'll have a virus vaccine discovered. So obviously after that everything goes back to normal, and then he can use the vehicle from shared mobility space, etc. So this shared mobility customer is a very ripe customer because he wants mobility needs without owning a vehicle. The same thing is provided by subscription. You're not owning the vehicle. But otherwise, if you look at it, the mindset of the Indian customer is that if I don't own the vehicle, why should I pay for it? And why should I keep it in my garage? So that's why the thing is that before COVID, the subscription or leasing models have not really taken off the way they should have, or the way the other markets have. We are still emotionally attached to the purchase. After the house, it's the car. So I need to own the vehicle to kind of say that this is my car. Now, if this is not happening, and I'm okay to travel from A to B in a shared mobility space, and I want to still do that post COVID without owning a car, then subscription is a very, very right answer. Now, it's only a question of the mindset issue, and I think if you see it from that point of view, I think the question is not subscription. The question is why is not subscription taking off? The way it should take off. Then that's the point that we have to address.
No, no, absolutely. I agree with you as well. I think this is one of those, again, like we mentioned earlier, it's a discretionary purchase, the car. And of course,
Yeah,
it's something that you also treat as a member of the family at the end of the day. I mean, you do the
absolutely.
full puja, you do the car blessed, and, it's treating it like, a very intimate part of the family. And
The
you
whole
want to
family stands around the vehicle and takes a picture, and the center stage is the vehicle.
absolutely, absolutely. So when it's that intimate a purchase, I don't think I think it's still that kind of buyer who wants that as a part of the family rather than just as, paying guest sort of
Yeah, yeah.
mode. Yeah.
Thank
I'll one more last question. And this comes in from Blaze Jose, who says safety and economic travel is key, but why isn't the electric car promoted? We keep talking about nature conservation, but why can't the sector focus on CNG, hydrogen, or electric-based cars on a larger scale? I'll start off with you, Naveen, on this.
Say again.
Naveen, I'll start off with you. Blaze Jose has got a question saying, he says safety and economic travel is key, but why isn't the electric car promoted? And we keep talking about conservation. Why can't the sector focus on CNG, hydrogen, or electric-based cars on a larger scale? What are the challenges essentially for this sector?
Primarily infrastructure would be my take on this, because if you're talking about hydrogen, again, you need a hydrogen station. If you're talking about electric, you need an electric charging station. But as far as, yes, CNG, again, the same issue. But at least there's some maturity as far as CNG is concerned, because there are various governments, there are various states which are focusing on CNG. So therefore, it creates a good ecosystem. I think it's at the end of it, what the customer is willingness to pay. It's a very price sensitive market, as you and I know. So it's willingness to pay for these technologies which have not reached the scale. The biggest deterrent would be also the kind of alternative choices that he or she has. If he's got a choice for an developed good IC engine, which is producing lesser emissions because of Euro 6 and now going forward, maybe even stricter regulations, then he achieves the same need with alternate source of fuel currently as it is available. But as I said earlier, also future, like, it is fait accompli. You and I will be living in a world 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, which will have more and more electrified vehicles. Maybe not just pure electric, but electrified vehicles is what we would like to observe. Thank you.
I'll talk with you as well, Shashank, but with a twist over here is that uh, we talk about infrastructure and we definitely agree. I think all of us agree that is one of the challenges that electrification is facing. But whom does this onus lie on? Private sector, public sector, manufacturer, consumer, government. Where do we expect this infrastructure to come in from, largely?
Yeah, I think everybody has a role to play in developing that infrastructure. It's not just government has to do it. It's not as if only the OEMs have to do it. So it's all everybody's responsibility in that sense. And I wouldn't entirely agree that the infrastructure is what is keeping the electric vehicles penetration low. As I had mentioned in the earlier part of this discussion, the battery technology which is currently available is actually very expensive, and that is also one of the reasons why there is not only in India but the penetration of electric across the world is less, except for a very few countries. So I think on that part of we need to have some breakthrough, which probably will happen as we go along, because we've just started that journey. And I like very much what Naveen said. It may not be just electric vehicles; it may be electrified vehicles. And I think that's what is something which I've learned from Naveen in his various discussions. He makes this point, and I completely agree. because that's what is the evidence very much on the ground is about that, not about electrification, but about electrified vehicles. And yes, infrastructure. I think my personal feeling is when the market becomes ripe for something, everything starts falling in place. So once the consumer starts, and when we have conditions where consumers start going one way or the other, you will find players coming in to fill in the need not only of the vehicles but also of the infrastructure as well.
I'll let you have the last word, Tarun. You're smiling over there because you're the one with the electric vehicle in the market currently. You have the on ground realities in your space. What is your view on this, sir?
But I have a slightly different view. I think somebody has to take a lead. And we have talked too much about electric and CNG today, but hydrogen was also mentioned in the question. And if I
Yeah,
talk about Hyundai, hydrogen fuel cell is something I think we have taken the lead. We are already selling vehicles in Korea. In the Auto Expo this time, we displayed the
yes,
hydrogen fuel
you
cell
did
vehicle,
so.
and I think we got a very good traction. So I think it is also about technology leadership. So somebody takes a lead. I think sometimes when you take the lead, other things also automatically follow. Otherwise, you will keep on waiting. Okay, the infrastructure will come, the price will come down, this thing will happen. So then nothing will happen. So I think as far as Hyundai is concerned, we believe very strongly that everybody has to play a very important role. As OEM, we have to see the customer demand. We have to show the customer what we can do, and then accordingly, go ahead and introduce the products. Of course, we have to be in touch with the government, in touch, whether it's the private companies, whether it's the OEM itself. I think, like what Shashank said, I agree on that part that everybody will have to fill in the entire ecosystem. But OEM, it has to start with the OEM. We have to invest in technology, and we have to see, show this technology to the customer and see, elicit that interest in the customer. I think then the ball will set rolling and everything will fall into place.
Right. Thank you for that, Tarun, and thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Shashank. Thank you, Naveen. I think we're running out of time. We have to end, but it was a wonderful discussion with you all. We definitely, I think we've got a variety of opinions on this, and the ground reality is, of course, that at least it's good to see that the industry is moving along the way it had planned. Also, and things are shaping up to some extent the way all hoped would shape up in the future. There have been disruptions. Yes, we all agree with that. But you are getting back onto your feet very, very fast, very quickly. And all the best to the automotive industry at large as well. We hope to see a recovery. Uh, Tarun, I wouldn't agree with you on the fact that the digital age is the way to go forward. Being a journalist, we'd like to be there physically present, seeing your cars as well. Yeah, you had a fantastic presentation of the VR and AR, but we would like not to drive a car on VR or AR.
Sure.
So with that, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being
Thank
with
you.
us, and much
Thank
success.
you.
Thank you. It was
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.